Hello, I'm Gus Downing, publisher and editor of the D&D Daily, and this is the LP News Network. Today's episode covers the Cybersecurity Act of 2015, cyber information sharing, and the current state of the EMV transition in the U.S. from a national perspective. With us today to talk about these subjects is Tom Litchford, the Vice President, Retail Technologies at the National Retail Federation, and Bob Maraca, the Vice President of Loss Prevention at the NRF. As the largest trade association in North America, the NRF has led the way in the cybercrime fight and is helping steer the EMV efforts across the nation. The NRF is playing a vital role in Washington on congressional legislative efforts regarding these issues and has lobbied tirelessly on behalf of the nation's retailers on both of these subjects. Gentlemen, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Gus. Enjoy this.
Tom, let's start with the elephant in the room, EMV. We're over 3 months into the October 1st liability shift mandate. Who made it, who didn't, and why?
Right. It's an absolutely easy question. Not many made it. and by that, I mean not just retailers. The banks didn't make it either, which is kind of incredulous since they're the ones that issued the mandate. But specifically to retailers, we actually did a survey back in September, right before the mandate of October 1st. And let me put my glasses on, I want to get the numbers right. But at that point, about 5% of retailers expected to make the date. And another 50% were trying hard to make the date, so not for lack of trying, they just didn't make it, and I'll explain that in a minute. And another 45% weren't as concerned with the date, or were just going to include it in their next point-of-sale refresh, right? So back on that explanation I was going to talk about, the 95% then who missed it, 20% felt that they would make it by the end of the year, and another 80% said we'll be done by this year, specifically first half of this year. So they are trying aggressively to get this done. But the problem, you know, the three main issues. Payment terminal providers flat out ran out of inventory. They could not support the demand for inventory. POS providers weren't ready with their software. But overarching, the number one reason was we're in the queue waiting for certification. And look at the irony there. Who certifies us? The people that told us the mandate. So we're waiting on the financial industry to get us certified, so that because of that we missed the date. So the very ones that issued the mandate now with their monopoly power are unable to support us. Their poor planning and execution has not only impacted retailers, but their customers now.
So, you know, any fallout, the customer acceptance, what's happening with chargeback so far?
Yeah. Customer acceptance, I think really that's more of a customer confusion problem. The overarching there is, I mean, NRF has surveys on this on the consumer side too. We know that they think security of their credit cards is important. And number one, by and far, is they wonder, why did the banks only go halfway? Why did you not put a PIN on my credit card, right? And you have to think about it. Tell me, can you name one major breach of the debit PIN system? The answer is no, there are none. It's the easiest thing we could have done, just put a PIN on the charge cards and solve the problem. But I digress.
But Visa said, and came out publicly and said, they didn't think the American consumer could remember their PIN.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's why they did it.
Yeah, so we just write it on the back of our card, right?
Right, exactly.
But go figure, how long have we been using them with ATMs?
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So, but anyway, again, we digress. So back to the consumers. They're confused as why the transactions are taking so long. I mean, they're used to swiping, boom, done, right? So that's confusing them, especially through the busy holiday season.
Did it delay the customer movement at the register?
Yeah, I know retailers that actually were ready to go that actually then deinstalled because it was slowing the lines up so fast, so bad. And then the third reason is they're wondering, why did only half of them or one of my cards get replaced, and I still have another card that's an old Mag Stripe, and how come I can't use it at all, the retailer? So there's just this mass confusion out there that, again, that the card brands have flexed their monopoly power here, and just they're not serving their consumers, much less helping retailers.
How could they hold us to a liability date when they're the ones not ready in certifying the terminal?
You keep asking million-dollar questions here. I don't know. But go back to your chargeback question, right? The liability shift's come and gone. And around November 1st, I started getting the first calls from our members. The chargebacks have spiked through the roof, right? And so explaining chargebacks, right, the liability is, that means I was given a fraudulent counterfeit EMV card,
Right.
and I did not have the equipment capable of processing it, so I used the magstripe, right? So the banks are now charging those back to us. We've seen a significant spike in those chargebacks. And the problem here, there's absolutely no recourse. I cannot challenge it. I can go back and say, here's the video of the customer, here's their driver's license I checked, and by the way, here's their signature that you told me was good enough, and they say, nope, I'm sorry, it was an EMV card, you're stuck with it. So we're really, really concerned about what's going on there with those types of chargebacks.
Were the retailers putting any money in reserve to cover this loss, this increased shrink, so to speak?
I honestly can't answer that. I don't know that they expected that to happen.
Okay. You know, any more on that question? Or?
No, that's...
Okay. We've all heard that EMV is not the panacea for securing consumers' payment data. You know, if that's the case, what else are they doing? What's the other retailers doing?
Right. Another great question. Again, I mentioned earlier, if you just put a pin on the mag stripe, we could have solved the problem. We know EMV solves basically one problem, and that's counterfeit cards for the bank. So it protects the banks from counterfeit cards. If it had a pin on it, it would also protect me if I lost or had my card stolen. But there's no pin, so that protection is lost. We also know that EMV is 20-plus-year-old technology. So really, was it the right answer? Probably not. We could talk about that for a whole day if you want. But knowing that, what retailers have done, in fact, on the survey I asked, and it was around 85% of them are deploying P2P encryption. Okay. So from the point, if you know that most of the breaches have been in-memory malware that is scraping memory by encrypting that at point of swipe or point of insert, that basically takes away that capability. You can still encrypted data all you want. You're not going to do anything with it. So we see there 85% by the end of this year on the survey had P2P encryption installed, whether they were doing EMV or not. And also back-end tokenization. So in other words, if I have to store credit card information for any reason at all, I'm going to tokenize that number. So again, it's useless if it gets stolen. Another key thing I see going on, which I love this one, is multi-factor authentication. So you're starting to see, you know, we know that some of the breaches were through third-party suppliers. So they're getting multi-factor authentication now. So we're doing away with just the log on and password and forcing you to prove who you are that you're trying to log on.
Whether it be a text or it be a phone call or an email.
Or the key fobs, things like that.
Right.
So lots of things going on there.
Right. Bob, how has the LP group been responding to the transition to EMV? I mean, have they seen an increase in online fraud yet, or is it too early? And have you heard anything about the chargebacks as well?
Yeah, it is too early to tell. We're talking October, and as Tom just explained, that a lot of the deadlines weren't made. So there is still some confusion. The hardware wasn't prepared and ready, and the certification problem. Basically, we're not sure. We know the experience that took place in Europe, where the fraud didn't take place then at the point of sale, but it was taking place online. We expect to see that spike, but nobody has any real numbers on this yet. The other issue is, interestingly enough, I was talking to a couple of retailers who have just going to bypass this and do what Tom said about the tokenization and encryption almost on their own, you know, totally independent of all this, but it'll get them to a safer place, because nobody wants to be the next headline. And at the end of the day, and the back end, I've also had retailers who have said they're waiting. They're going to wait this out and see where it ends up, because they may have a new platform coming soon that they don't want to reinvest over the reinvestment. So, you know, they're working with their IT folks, which they should be, you know, tied at the hip on this issue, but following their lead, trying to clarify some of the confusion.
You know, one question for you with encryption. You know, the government's trying to get Silicon Valley to allow them to get through encryption as it relates to terrorism and communications and such. Is that a slippery slope? I mean, if Silicon Valley allows the government to get through encryption, does that open the door up for hackers and the ELPs to get there as well, so to speak?
Absolutely. You put a back door in, the bad guys are going to eventually find it.
Okay.
So spot on there.
Is that why they're blocking it? Is that one of the reasons, one of the many?
Well, it's just
privacy concerns?
Well, obviously there's privacy. You know, again, in terms of how this country was founded, we just don't allow stuff like that.
Right.
So the technology companies are pushing back on that, but the solution doesn't make sense either, right? Because the bad guys will get access to it. If I could just build on
Please,
Bob
go
too,
ahead.
on the online fraud, obviously we're going to see the shift
Right.
to online fraud, and we know it's coming. But keep in mind, retailers have always been responsible for that fraud because it's a card not present transaction. So there is a lot of investment going on in there too in terms of fraud identification. And we have a little bit of luxury there. That's probably the wrong word. But, you know, if it's fraud in the store, the merchandise has gone out the door.
Right.
Online, at least I can hold that shipment until I have some validation, okay, this is probably not a fraudulent order, let that shipment go. So you're seeing those types of systems put in place to identify potential fraudulent transactions online.
How long do you think it's going to take to clear this up and get everybody EMV'd, so to speak?
Yeah.
And how long do you think it's going to take?
Well, I think it's years. I mean, if you look at my survey, the majority of the folks, at least the tier 2, tier 1 retailers are saying they're going to be done by next year, with very few carrying into 2017. But I think the risk here really is our smaller retailers.
Right.
You know, there's just been a really poor job educating them on what's happening. We're already seeing the criminals go after them. I mean, obviously, there's not going to be the millions and millions of data theft that you're seeing in the big
still
retailers.
To the mom and pops that can destroy them.
Yeah, if I can just, you know, keep, you know, sending a little stream of credit cards once in a while, they'll take that. It costs them a little more money in terms of theft, but they'll take it.
And I want to
it.
credit the NRF for fighting on their behalf on the small retailers' part. I see that in your media all the time, where you're just not there for the big guy, you're also there for the small guy, which is just commendable as heck. And I want, from a media perspective, I see it all the time, so I kind of want to commend the NRF in that regard.
Thank you.
You know, I know the NRF has a strong IT security council that's over 200 retail CISOs now. How has that Cybersecurity Act of 2015 impacted them?
Right. So that act actually was a huge win for the industry. I don't know that it's impacted them a lot yet. It was just passed in the last couple of months. But the key there is sharing intelligence, cyber intelligence, we know is the #1 thing we can do to fight cybercrime. And if I've got a piece of intelligence and I won't share it because I'm afraid I'm going to get sued by the government or whatever, that's an impediment. So this act was extremely important. NRF supported that act. And the key thing with that is because NRF has a relationship with Homeland Security, we have what's called a CRADA, which is a Cooperative Research and Development Agreement with them. Our members now can share information through us, with us to go back to the DHS, and then that protects them and removes the liability, or gives them liability protection for that sharing. So that's just a great example of how NRF is working with our members to help get this two-way sharing going on. So if one member sees something suspicious, then hopefully through our threat alert system, all of our members are going to see that immediately.
Bob, Tom, thank you for being here today.
All right, thank you.
That's it for this episode, ladies and gentlemen. We'd like to thank you for watching. And until next time, let's keep them all safe out there.